Welcome, friends. Because of the uncertainty created by the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of astrological analyses are floating on the internet, including on the social media space. Now, I'm not going to jump onto that bandwagon and add another prediction from my side. This particular video is more of an academic nature and it is meant for the students of astrology, KP or otherwise. In this video, I'm going to discuss about the challenges of predicting a global event, and we will also look into some of the current methods and the shortcomings in those methods. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what Krishnamurti has said about the mundane astrology, and we are going to look at a chart about this current crisis using Krishnamurti Paddhati. So before we move forward, as a student of astrology, you might want to take note of few things. One is that during these times, your social media space is flooded with messages that I call as "we already predicted this" syndrome. So what is meant by "we already predicted this"? That our book, our ancient book, already predicted about this particular event. And it doesn't matter about what religious background you have. People from all religions, all kind of faith and background, they tend to come forward and try to justify that in one of their some old books it's already predicted about this particular pandemic. So that's one thing that you might want to take note of. And second is the pseudo spiritual organizations that tend to create a great deal of fear psychosis during these times. And by creating a fear psychosis, these pseudo spiritual organizations are able to exploit more people. So that's the second thing. Third is the message that you will see are based on or take the help of the user, Nostradamus, which is the darling of mundane astrology. And so if you want to prove anything, any event, all you have to do is just uh, give some reference to Nostradamus, some words, and you can not only prove a global event, but you can prove a national or even local event or even, some personal event as well using, Nostradamus. So these are the three things that you might want to take a note of. And since you are a practicing astrologer or a student of astrology, then people sometimes might look at you for your opinion on these kind of things. So I want to draw your attention on these things. Now let's move forward and look at the what are the challenges when it comes to analyzing or predicting the global events. Because the world doesn't have a horoscope, it doesn't have a date, time, place. So you don't have a horoscope of the world, and so that's one of the big challenge. And let me take this example: the World War One and the World War Two. The now, if you the current method that are in circulation, the first method is they use the annual horoscope, and where when sun moves into the 0 degree, and then a horoscope is prepared, and on the basis of that, then an annual reading for that particular country is done. Sometimes even the countries, they also have their own horoscope. Then second is the transit of the slow moving planets like Saturn, Rahu and Ketu. Now let's look at how effective these two methods could possibly be. Now if you look at World War One, it spanned over multiple years, 1914 to 1918, and World War Two was 1939 to 1945. Now the annual horoscope method has a very short and narrow 1 year vision only. It can't be used to analyze events spanning multiple years. Even the current crisis, the current pandemic, it started last year in 2019, and now it has spanned over to 2020. So annual horoscope, I don't think is the right way to analyze any global event. Now some of the astrologers, they are stretching their imagination and and using this method, the annual horoscope method, but I don't think it has any significance in predicting a event of global nature. Now, second is the transit of the slow moving planets like Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu. There some videos are floating on the web where the repetitive cycle of these slow moving planets are used to indicate that they have gotten now into a bad position, and that's why the whole crisis has come up. For example, Rahu Ketu. Now Rahu Ketu, currently they are in their own star, and so now every 18 years Rahu and Ketu will make a cyclic round, and they will pretty much come back to their own star. If you look at all the slow moving planets, the Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, not only Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, if you look at all the planets, the maximum, after 120 years, they all come back to their same position. And not only the planets come back to their same position, even the Mahadasha makes a cyclic return to the same planet. So that means after 120 years, everything is same. So whatever happened 120 years ago should now start repeating. That is, it doesn't happen that way. And therefore this cyclic movement of planet cannot be used, and things doesn't happen that way. Even in a nation's chart, when you have a nation chart, and if you're trying to apply the shine transit after 120 years, it's just going to repeat. Everything is going to repeat. So history is not going to repeat for that particular nation after 120 years. So these two methods, the annual horoscope and the transit of the slow moving malefic planets, these are not really very useful in predicting about the global outcome of for the global events like the current pandemic. Now let's look at what Professor Krishnamurti has said or about the mundane astrology. Now before creating this video, I did try to find some useful material from Professor Krishnamurti in his books and in his articles, but I was unable to find. There are some scattered notes here and there, but there is no organized way or a procedure from Krishnamurti to help us navigate forward and try to predict the mundane events. Now, the only one thing that I did notice in Krishnamurti's book was that there was some query about prosperity of the institution and the Air India strike. Now these two questions are what we call of mundane nature, the event that relate to some national or global level, and these two questions were solved using the Krishnamurti's Horary method. So that's one thing that that caught my attention, and so I thought that I might want to use this the query thing and to analyze the current crisis. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, that this is more like on an academic level. This is not proven. I have not uh, predicted about any global events in the past. I do not have any hands-on experience. So I'm just trying to discuss this with the students and not with the general public. So, and in these two questions, one of the things that I noticed was that both of these questions were asked by someone directly related to the matter. So that's one thing as a student you might want to make a note of, that when you are posing a question for any national or a global event, are you supposed to be related to that event in some way? For example, when you pose a question about whether this particular party will win or not, so I don't know in what way you could be related to that. But I did notice that in these two questions, the questioner was somehow related to the both the questions. So, but if you look at the global crisis that we are facing versus the horary astrology, then you find there is a huge mismatch. it looks like Horary is a very trivial tool. One person asking about some event that is unfolding on the global level. So that kind of a thought did come to my mind, that is it the right tool for the mundane events of a global nature or not. So that's second thing I wanted to draw your attention to. Now third thing is that when I was looking more into the Horary method, there's one thing that did come to my notice, was that there are some hidden methods, not only in KP but outside KP also in some other books, that those methods they try to indicate to an astrologer about accepting or abandoning the task of solving a query. So that was something very surprising to me, and I thought that the one query chart that's going to use to analyze a particular event, that query chart can also be used to analyze whether the particular astrologer will be able to make a successful prediction or not. So in one way, I thought that if somehow we can work on this and try to figure out that what is the how we can find out whether an astrologer is eligible for answering a question. That way, it will help many astrologers shut up their mouth and not venture into offering any prediction. So now, so eventually, like I mentioned, the Krishnamurti's Horary astrology is the only method that I could find out that could be used for predicting mundane event. So on 6th of March, while I was watching one of the programs on CBS, and that program was on this pandemic, and at that time I had a huge urge, and there was a anxiety on my mind about the outcome of this disease, like when the world is going to be healed. The question was about this disease, and when the world is going to be healed, when we are going to find a solution for this disease. The question was not related to any economic impact or any socio-political impact arising out of this disease. So I sent this number to one of my friend who is a practicing senior astrologer in Ranchi, India, and and I would like to thank him for sharing some of his inputs with me. And here is the chart. And you might want to note down these particulars, and if you have any software, you might want to generate a chart that's more suitable to your need. And I would scroll to the part of the screen where we can start analyzing this chart. And before we do that, I would once again like to let you know that this is all from purely academic angle only. Now here is pretty much what you need to analyze this chart, this horary chart from the Krishnamurti's point of view. Now the first thing is that this is a Cancer ascendant ruled by Moon, which indicates general public in the mundane astrology. So that was a very surprising thing that I noticed. And second is the Moon is in 12th. Moon, as you can see, is in 12th. And Moon is also the cuspal sublord of the ascendant 7 and 8. Moon is here, the cuspal sublord of the ascendant, and the 7th and the 8th. This is not a very happy position for the Moon. And then Moon is in the star of Saturn. Moon here you see is in the star of Saturn over here. And so for the Cancer ascendant, Saturn is not really a good planet. So any planet that's going to be in the star of Saturn is not going to give a good result. And if you look at this chart, Saturn is already in the 6th house and is the owner of 7th and the 8th house. So the Moon, that is the ascendant lord, that appears as the cuspal sublord of the ascendant, is already in the star of Saturn, which indicates 6 and 8. And Moon is already indicating Moon is in the 12th house. Another thing that uh, the one thing that I wanted to draw your attention was that if you look at the moon's sublord over here, and this is the this column gives the value of the planet at the fourth step. This is not sub lord column. This is the column indicating the planet's position at the fourth step. So if you look at moon, the moon is in the star of Saturn, but at the sub and at the fourth level, it is in the sub of Ketu. Ketu in this chart is very strong because Ketu is in the fifth house, which is a house of recovery. So the chart itself and the position of moon clearly indicates the nature of query. So this was one very surprising thing for me, that somebody asking about a global event just based on a Horary number, and this chart is a no-brainer chart. And if you have some experience in Krishnamurti Paddhati, you can see that the query is very strongly reflected. So that's one thing. Second is that let's look at uh, the the disease, the house of disease. So when you look at the sixth house, and so sixth house is in it has Sagittarius as the cusp, and the star is Ketu, and the sublord is Mercury. Now, one of the things that you notice about this is that Sagittarius is a dual sign, and Jupiter is also in Sagittarius. That Jupiter is also in a dual sign, and the cuspal sublord Mercury of the sixth cusp. Mercury itself is a planet of dual quality. This is not good. When you are analyzing a chart from the angle of disease and recovery, then the the planets that are related to the sixth house, when they start occupying the dual sign, or if they themselves have a dual nature, this usually indicates a relaxing nature. So this is something that's not good. And now, if you look at the cuspal sublord Mercury of the sixth cusp, then Mercury you find is in Mars star, and Sun sublord, and Jupiter at the fourth level. So if you look at, these are all related to Mars is in sixth, and Sun is in eighth, Jupiter is in sixth. So the cuspal sublord of the sixth cusp, that's Mercury, is predominantly related to the sixth and the eighth house, and Mercury is the owner of the 10th house. So the sixth house, cuspal sublord, is not really in a very nice position. So from this, by reading the ascendant sublord and the sixth sublord and other things related to those two houses, it's very clear about the strength of the disease and the nature of the query. Now let's look at from some other angle. Now the horary number ascendant sublord. The horary number ascendant sublord is moon, and that's appearing in the ruling planet. These are the ruling planets over here. These are the ruling planets over here. Okay. So the ascendant sublord moon is one of the ruling planets. So that's very nice to have. Then, if you look at the moon is connected to the fifth house. Though moon is in the star of Saturn, but at the sub and the fourth level, you see that moon is in the star of Ketu, and Ketu is in the fifth house. So this is a very very strong and nice saving grace, especially in a horary chart. So moon's connection to either the fifth or the 11th. We don't see 11th over here, but the fifth is very strong. The moon's connection to fifth is very strong. So that's a very huge saving grace. And then now, if you look at now when we in Krishnamurti Paddhati, when you talk about the recovery from an illness, then you look at the 11th house of Lord, 11th house, fifth house also. And so now, if you look at Venus, Now, if you look at Venus, you find that Venus appears here at the as the fifth sublord, and then over here as the 11th sublord, and then you find Venus is in the star of Ketu. Ketu is already in the fifth, and Venus is in the sub of Rahu. Rahu is in the 11th, and at the fourth step also it indicates Rahu. So Venus is very, very positive, very promising, and it does indicate that there is going to be a full recovery from this illness. So now when you are analyzing any horary chart, then one of the things that you should keep in mind is that the the cuspal sublord of the horary number here, this like moon, if it becomes one of the ruling planet, that is usually a very good indication that eventually the things are going to become positive. And irrespective of the query, if uh, that ascendant sublord has something to do with the fifth house and the 11th house, then that is really nice thing to have in any query chart, and that usually indicate that the results are eventually going to be positive. Now let's move forward and look at each of these planets quickly. And so Ketu is in Ketu star. So when a node is in node star, and that too Ketu is alone in the fifth house, this becomes very strong. So Ketu is very strong in terms of giving the fifth house result. But if you look at the sub level and the fourth level, Saturn and Sun are not good at all. So it's more like a tug of war. Ketu wants to give the result of the fifth house, but at the same time, at the sub level and at the fourth level, it's not very positive. So that's with the Ketu. Venus we have already discussed. Venus is extremely nice, and Venus is also Lord of. You have to read Venus also as Lord of 11th, indicating fifth and 11th. So that's a very nice to have. Sun is bad. You can see Sun is bad. Moon will play a tug of war, like we discussed that, and I would like to focus your attention on Moon, because Moon is going to play a very crucial role in this chart, because of being the ascendant lord, the ascendant sublord, uh, and then Moon is at the star level it's not good, but at the sub level it is good. So it's going to play a tug of war. Good, bad, both things are going to happen. Mars is very strong, and Mars you have to read as the fifth lord, indicating 11th, right? Mars is in the star of Venus. So fifth lord is in the star of 11th house, Lord Venus. So Mars is strong. And now let's look at Rahu. You look at Rahu. Rahu is in the Rahu star, and the Rahu is in the 11th. So that's very strong and positive. 11th house is very good. But if you look at the sub level, then you notice that Saturn and Sun again are bad. Another thing about Rahu and Ketu is that whatever Ketu does, Rahu tries to undo the same thing. And since right now, the sub period of Ketu is going on. So, and the whole pandemic has exploded during the Ketu's this thing. So Rahu is going to undo that. Or Rahu will have the power to undo it. We'll discuss that later. But that's one of the things that you might want to take a note of when looking at the result of Ketu and Rahu. And now uh, Mars is in Rahu star. So sorry, Mars is in Venus star, and Rahu sub, and Rahu at the fourth step also. One of the things about Mars is that when Mars gives the positive result, then it gives a level of confidence also. In Krishnamurti Paddhati, Mars is used to indicate that a person or a situation will have a positive confidence. So that's one of the thing about Mars. Rahu we already discussed, but Rahu is bad at the third and the fourth step. And Jupiter is positive. Jupiter in the star of Venus, and Ketu is positive. And another thing about the Jupiter is that Jupiter is the lord of the ninth house, and it is strongly indicating the fifth house. So when Jupiter becomes the lord of the ninth house, and if it is supporting other good houses, then what we typically call as the providential help is going to be there. So, or which we call this as prayers are going to be answered. So that's how you have to interpret the Jupiter over here. Saturn and Mercury are bad. So this is how these planets are unfolding uh, in this query chart. And now if you look at the dasha, you know, so dasha is the Saturn and Ketu. Ketu is going to be there until January 2021. And we have discussed that Saturn we know is not good, and Ketu is also not good. And at Ketu at star level is good, but at the sub and both level it's not good. So, and then after that we will have the Venus period. That's going to happen in sometime in 2021. So, what do we do? How do we predict when you have a global crisis unfolding by hours, and there is a panic everywhere, and and then you have to predict that how the, the world is going to come out of this whole crisis. So when we looked at all these planets, and let's quickly look at some of the periods that are going to unfold. Saturn Ketu, we know is not good, but Ketu, because of being in the Ketu star in fifth, is able to offer some help, provided at the third level or at the sub period, or the Antara period, if it gets support from some other planets. So right now you will have this period from March 27th to April 30th. That's the Ketu and the moon period. The moon we have already discussed. The moon is very crucial in this chart. It is the ascendant lord. It appears as the cuspal sublord of the 1 and the 7 and 8 also. And there is another thing that I forgot to mention. The moon is also a self-significator. So what is meant by self-significator? Means that no other planet is in the moon's star. If you look here, you will not find moon anywhere, right? You don't find moon anywhere at the star level. That means moon is the significator of its own houses, and those are 1 and 12. So moon has an extremely important role to play over here. And this period from 27 March to April, 30th of April, is when the moon sub period becomes operative. So this period is something I want uh, you guys to take a note of and think about it. And after that, there is the Mars period. We know Mars is good, and then Rahu is not good. Jupiter is good. Saturn, Mercury are not really very positive. Now, the one thing that I wanted to draw your attention was that we already had, Venus sub period that ended on the March, and Venus is very very positive in this horoscope. So I was thinking that Saturn is bad, Ketu is bad, and Ketu is good and bad both. But despite Venus being so strong in this horoscope, this period was not able to give much help to Ketu, and Venus has also appeared, one of the ruling planets. So I thought that what could be the reason, and the only reason I could find was the transit. And if you look at so these planets like Rahu and Ketu and Saturn, all these three malefic planets, they are in the right now transiting in the Saturn sub. So unless and until there is some change in the sublord position of these planets, they are going to give you a bad result. The Saturn Ketu is going to give bad result, despite even if they have a good and strong positive planet at the Bhukti level, sorry, the Antara level. And so I looked at the online ephemery, and I did notice that sometime, I guess in first week of May or something, most of these planets will be leaving the Saturn sub, and they will be transiting into some other sub. So, and at that time you will have the Mars period. Mars is good, and the transit seems to be, like I mentioned, they will be exiting out of the Saturn sub and moving into other subs. So that's one thing that I noticed, that maybe during the after the April, when the Mars period starts, and then we might have some very good and positive result. But I would like you to go through this chart, and I would like you to share your comments with us. And like in the beginning also I mentioned that this is meant for the students of astrology, and so if you have any insight or any comments to share, please do that. And if you have come across any Professor K.S. works on Krishnamurti's work on mundane astrology, then do leave a comment in the comment box. And finally, be safe. Thanks for watching.